All right. Hi. Hi. I'm on a little earlier today, so if you catch me on a replay, I'm going to be busy for the rest of the day, but I still need to record my podcast, and I do it on Wednesdays and I do it in front of the audience so that if there's any questions or anything, I can address them in real time. So my name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston, and I come on to kind of talk about these things that people struggle with and then talk about ways we can deal with them. And I'm streaming on multiple platforms. And I use one platform to do all the streaming. And last week we talked about nourishing your vision, something that people struggle with understanding how to do. One of the things at the end of the session last week is that we discussed how you may have dreams, but then if you're not doing anything with them, they're just there, right? And so in that session, you learned about how you can actually start to implement some of the things that you want to do in your life, which is so amazing to happen. Also, just want to say November 2nd, we are having an open house at my new wellness center. I'm so excited about. There'll be small group classes, and there will be a room where you can be creative and do some artistic stuff. So I'm excited about that. So let's get into this episode today. It's going to be a quick episode, but still important and powerful. So that I've heard, one of the quotes that I've heard before, that's powerful is like you can't patch a wounded soul with a band-aid. And so that's why today's topic is like, let's talk about actually healing mental health wounds and not covering it up. And as we talk about it, if you're new to this platform, if you're listening to me on audio, I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. But one of the things that I want people to understand is how the the way that they've been patching up their pain and why it's happening, because sometimes we give ourselves a lot of heartache at the way that we do things, not recognizing that we've been doing things a certain way because of our lack of being exposed to other coping modalities. And the more you are exposed to more coping modalities, the more you can actually change up the way you're doing things and how you've allowed things to affect you. So I want to start off by saying, we like, when it comes to quick fixes and when you think about pain, like no one would ever sign up for pain. Nobody wants to be in pain. Nobody wants to deal with pain. But pain is a part of life. And one of the things that feels freeing is like understanding that after the rain, there's a rainbow. Without, there's sun, there's darkness, and there's sun. When you start to think about that, it can help you so that when the darkness comes, when the rain comes, you can work on kind of having hope about the future. And some of us have not been shown how to cope. You've only learned how to deal with things that you struggle with through watching your caregivers. And for some people, it may be just swallowing things up. It may be just drinking. It may be just partying. It may be just ignoring. And so you're not really dealing with it that way, but it's just you're being like suffocated by it, and you're internalizing it. And imagine like being so young and not having a way to kind of deal with the things that you've been experiencing. So you internalize it and you find a way that you can learn how to do it. So, an example I wanted to give, so let's say you're dealing with anxiety, and at a young age, a lot of people don't know what that word means. Now, I find that the younger generation understands like anxiety and depression because they have access to the internet and people have talked about it. But let's just say you're dealing with this thing called anxiety. And, with anxiety, it's something that you can't see, it's something you're experiencing. And you have a drink, and then you start to like find that the anxiety doesn't feel as bad anymore. And so, what do? You drink again, and you start to learn like, when I drink, I don't have to deal with this anxiety. Like, I feel free, I can be myself. And then what happens is, the more you are using something, the more you have to continue using it to get that effect. Because the first effect was like amazing, But after that, it doesn't feel the same. So you have to get more and more. The same way if you eat like let's say you had a new cookie or a cake or something for the first time you eat it, it's like so good. And then after that, you may not have the same experience. And so when it comes to these things, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's relationships, there's so many ways that people have learned how to cope with their pain, not intentionally. It wasn't like, oh, let me start drinking so I can cope with my pain. I had this drink, or I'm in this relationship, or I'm eating this food, right? There's a lot of food addictions, or shopping, a lot of shopping addictions. I don't feel good about myself. Like, let me go shopping, and then putting myself in a financial burden because I don't realize that I'm trying to mitigate my pain through swiping my card. So the more you start to understand these things that you're doing, the better you can work on changing the narrative for yourself. So, like, for instance, instead of me, let's say that shopping is my addictions, and instead of me like getting ready to go to Marshall's to purchase something, I ask myself, how am I feeling? What do I need? a lot of a lot of times, even as a child, you weren't asked like, how are you feeling or what do you need? So how do you know how to do that as an adult? It doesn't just magically happen, right? And so s- podcasts like these and other uh modalities that you may listen to or hear, hopefully it can plant a seed so you can start to understand what you need to do for yourself, like what your body needs, what your system needs. So let's talk about solutions, right? So as you're thinking about these kind of ways you may have been coping that doesn't work for you, right? And it's like paying attention to it without judgment, right? Because I'm talking about healthy ways of coping. There's some ways that are not so healthy ways that we've been struggling with. And so don't judge yourself for what you're recognizing, because that's all you had access to at the time. So really be mindful as you're paying attention to these kind of behaviors. It's hard to do work on yourself when you're beating yourself up. It's hard to do work on yourself when you're judging yourself for how you are. And how you are happened because you were trying to survive and deal with life. And so as you're beginning to change and work on this awareness and work on changing the way you think about things, you can actually begin to find yourself able to use other modalities of healing. So let's talk about solutions, right? Because I don't want to just talk about, oh, this is the issue. I want people to like leave the podcast episode, whether you're listening to me on audio or video, I want you to leave with some tangibles and things to think about so you can work on replacing that behavior. So one is recognizing that you have these wounds, right? Doesn't mean you agree with it. Some of the things you may have experienced may not have been your fault. And it's like, if I begin to like accept it and recognize it, does that mean that I'm agreeing with what's happened? No, it doesn't mean that. But what is what is. You can't change the past, but you can work on the future and changing the future and how that looks for you. And the thing about the past is that, unfortunately, because you have allowed that wound to just like stay there, your mind, your system, everything is continuing to recreate that wound in different ways. So, for instance, let's say that something happened as a child, you have abandonment issues, and then you end up in a relationship, and let's say your partner's leaving for the day, and you find yourself struggling with them leaving. You're not struggling because they're leaving. You're struggling because the feeling of them leaving is bringing up issues from the past. And if you don't recognize that you may struggle with some abandonment issues, you're going to find yourself in relationships and situations where you're always going to find yourself feeling hurt. Right. So if you can work on recognizing and accepting, you know what, I have some abandonment issues, that abandonment feeling that may continue to come up won't direct your narrative in your relationships. The second thing I want you to think about doing is forgiving yourself and others if that works for you. Some people struggle with the idea of like what that looks like, forgiving other people. And I'm not here to challenge that or tell you like that's the only way. But I am telling you that if you're finding yourself being consumed by someone else who's no longer here, no longer in your life, if you're finding yourself being consumed by that person, and you can't move forward, I do want you to think about, what does that look like? Forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you accept. It's a matter of me trying to release this from my life. Also, forgiving yourself. There are some situations that we may have put ourselves in that's gotten us to a certain place. How do you heal? How do you move forward if you're constantly beating yourself up for that? So that's the second thing. The third thing I want you to think about is listening and reframing your thoughts about yourself in the situation. It's easy for me to go back and look at situations, money I've spent and be like, damn, I shouldn't have never spent that. What was wrong with me? Right? It's easy for us to judge ourselves for the decisions we've made because now we're looking at it from a different lens. Our future self is looking back. The same way when we talk to our kids or younger people, and if we had to do over, we would have taken a different route. And so we're looking at them as to why, like, why can't you just do this? Not recognizing like we've already had the experience and the wisdom and the knowledge. And so, yeah, we can look back and see it that way, but they may struggle with seeing it that way. So listen to what you're saying about yourself and your situation, right? Because again, if you're walking around bullying yourself about what you did or what you didn't do, how do you move forward? You're just going to find yourself stuck ruminating on these thoughts. But if it can be like, oh, you know what, this happened because of this, but I'm no longer that person anymore. I'm changed, right? I'm going in a new direction. When you start to affirm that, your mind is listening. That's the thing about our mind and the words that we say and how we say it. And when I talk to people and they're speaking about themselves negatively to me, that's a red flag where I'm like, if you're saying that to me, I can only imagine what you're saying to yourself on a daily basis. A lot of times we think that it's us against the world when it's really us against our own thoughts. Like we're walking around with big bullies in our head and don't even realize it's happening. Black and Fit said that's hard to do, but necessary. Very hard to do. I do want to say that as I'm talking about this stuff, it sounds easy, right? I'm talking about it in a very logical way. I wish logic and emotion would match, but it doesn't. So logically, it sounds easy, but emotionally, it does feel hard to do. And that's why you're going to work on creating systems to build it into your life where you're affirming yourself on a regular basis so that you start to normalize it. The best thing you can do as you're trying to work on change is create systems. If you follow me on Instagram and Facebook, I've been doing a 30-day Pilates challenge. I started October 1st. I'm always doing, like, one of the challenges was reading a book. Now I'm always reading, drinking water every day. Now I always have like water at my desk. Before I would have a sticky note on my computer that says don't forget to drink water because I wasn't drinking it consistently and I wanted to add it to my life. Something as simple as drinking water, something as simple as making up your bed. When you start, if there's habits that you're trying to create, if you can start with the little things, right? And then you master that, then you can do the bigger things. But the problem is like we're trying to do the bigger things and it's not happening fast enough. It doesn't look like what we think it should look like. And we just stop the process. And it's like, no, let me just start small and start with this process. So reframing your thoughts is important. You want to be careful on what you're saying to yourself because your mind's listening to you. And if you're only talking negative and you had a lot of bad experiences, your mind is just lumping all of that together, all of that together. Um, the next thing I'm going to think about is tapping into support. Support is important. Love those healthy habits. Yes. Support is important. We were not meant to do life alone. And, you know, the pandemic, I think, kind of created this isolation. A lot of people struggle with being out in the community. You've been away for so long. I created my wellness center because I really wanted to create more community programming and things for people because people are suffering in silence and it's just not fair. You're not being fair to yourself. So thinking about what does support look like? It could be your local church. It could be a group online, right? There's so many different ways. It could just be going out and doing something in the community with other people, but really looking at what support looks like. And then the last thing I want to say, and I have a 3-minute video I want you guys to watch, looking at alternative methods to therapy and treatment. So I'm glad that I'm a therapist because I don't want people to think I'm hating on therapy because I love therapy. I was in therapy. I mean, I am in therapy, but I was in it for a long time when I was 25, my first introduction to therapy. And I lucked out and it worked out. Like I had a good therapist, I had good insurance. So I didn't have those barriers of not having the right therapist or not having insurance. So I think therapy's great, psychiatry's great, right? But I do feel like in our country, in America, for people listening to me here, we only capitalize or idolize like therapy and psychiatry. We look at that as the only two modalities. And I just want people to know like that's not it. Like really think about, how do I decolonize what like healing looks like for me? Even when I talk about like moving your body, I don't say like working out or going to the gym. Everybody can't afford the gym. Everybody doesn't have that capacity. And so I'm always talking about moving your body. Like, what does moving your body? It could be like putting on a song and dancing. We try to make, and then we live in a capitalistic society where they're always trying to sell you something or make you believe that you need to have this in order for it to be okay. What was that thing called? It was the that machine that everybody had in the pandemic. It was like Peloton. I remember the Pelotons was like, man, if you had stock in Pelotons, you was gonna get paid. And so like all the gadgets and stuff were cool, it was expensive. Like if you can afford it, great for you. But then people were like, oh, I got to get this Peloton so I can work out. They get the Peloton and the Peloton's collecting dust, right? The way that things are marketed to us, it makes it you feel like you can't do these things without this. But I promise you can. Like you can do it if you start to work on decolonizing what healing looks like and not making it the way that society says it should look like. So like yoga, mindfulness are different practices, Reiki are different practices. Like there are so many different practices that are available to us. And I also want to add, especially the black community, like we were not we were brought here to this country. We were stripped of a lot of the practices that we had, and a lot of them were made. A lot of the practices that we had, people brought religion into it and made those practices seem like there's something wrong with those practices, right? And so there's different practices that people aren't exposed to or don't know about or are afraid of. And a lot of it is because of how religion, and I say I'm a very spiritual person, I'm not religious. I feel like when you think about religion, a lot of it is very systematic, and spirituality looks different than religion. And so there's a lot of practices that we've had access to, community that we have access to, that we've completely abandoned. And I follow a lot of healers and I see how we're bringing it back, but it's important for people to understand that there's so many different modalities that are available. So I want to just share this 3-minute video about alternatives to therapy, because I really want you to think about this as you're working on your healing journey, so that you're no longer using band-aids to fix a wound, right? Like if blood is gushing out and the wound's opening up, and so I start with a small band-aid, but then it's like, dang, it's still opening up, so let me get a bigger band-aid, right? I need to go to the doctor and address, like, why does this wound keep opening up, instead of just putting a band-aid on it, right? I'm changing it and I'm making the bandages bigger, but I'm not getting to the root of the problem. And so when I think about the wounds that people have, they're masking it with so many different things, but you're not getting to the root of the problem. And so unfortunately, it's kind of um, creating a way, it's creating a sense in you where you're always feeling that pain. Like it feels like the pain never changes. It feels like you're always going to be in this predicament. So let's watch this quick alternative to therapy video.
Alternative therapies for mental health, exploring non-traditional approaches. In recent years, there has been a growing interest in alternative therapies for mental health. Traditional methods, such as medication and talk therapy, are undoubtedly effective, but may not be suitable for everyone. Alternative therapies, such as art therapy, music therapy, and animal-assisted therapy, offer unique ways to support mental health. This article explores these non-traditional approaches and their effectiveness, providing insights into how they can complement or even substitute conventional treatments. Art therapy, unleashing creativity for emotional well-being. Art therapy involves the use of creative techniques such as drawing, painting, collage, coloring, or sculpting to help people express themselves artistically and examine the psychological and emotional undertones in their art. This therapy can be particularly effective for individuals who find it hard to express their feelings verbally. Example, art therapy in trauma recovery. Consider the case of individuals recovering from trauma. Art therapy allows them to externalize and visualize their experiences, which can be a powerful step in processing and overcoming trauma. A study published in the Journal of Traumatic Stress indicates that art therapy can significantly reduce trauma symptoms and improve mood. Music therapy, healing through rhythm and melody. Music therapy uses music to address physical, emotional, cognitive, and social needs. It includes activities like listening to music, playing an instrument, drumming, writing songs, and guided imagery with music. Example, music therapy for depression and anxiety. For patients with depression or anxiety, music therapy has been found to be a valuable tool. It can provide a sense of comfort, enhance mood, and offer an outlet for expression. A review published in the World Journal of Psychiatry suggests that music therapy can have a significant positive effect on mood and reduce anxiety. Animal-assisted therapy, the therapeutic power of animals. Animal-assisted therapy involves interactions with animals, such as dogs, horses, or even dolphins, to help improve an individual's mental health. This therapy can be particularly beneficial for reducing stress, anxiety, depression, and feelings of loneliness. Example, equine-assisted therapy for PTSD. A notable form of animal-assisted therapy is equine-assisted therapy, EAT, which involves interactions with horses. EAT has been particularly effective in treating PTSD. A study in the Journal of Clinical Psychology found that EAT led to significant improvements in PTSD symptoms among military veterans. While traditional therapies remain the cornerstone of mental health treatment, alternative therapies offer valuable supplementary options. Art therapy, music therapy, and animal-assisted therapy provide unique and effective ways to manage various mental health issues. These therapies emphasize the importance of holistic treatment approaches, recognizing that healing can take many forms. As mental health awareness continues to grow, so too will the appreciation and utilization of these non-traditional therapies in the journey towards psychological well-being.
All right. That was a quick video that just talked about a few different therapies that people may not have thought about. I know when it comes to music, I used to always listen to music and feel good. And I wasn't doing it because I was like, oh, like I'm struggling, let me listen to music. But knowing what I know now, I see some of the practices that I was doing was like helping me. So people that are creative, sometimes it's hard to talk about your problems. It's sometimes when you're drawing or when you're coloring or doing something creative and artistic, you find yourself feeling good. It's not by accident, it's because that's what's helping you. So I say all this to say, pay attention to the things that you enjoy, the things that help you, and start to implement it in your life. The same way if the doctor said take this Tylenol twice a day to get rid of the headache, right? I want you to think about some of the practices that you have that you're already doing that may be helpful, and look at it as your medicine. Like we have medicines to survive, right? There's insulin, there's high blood pressure medication, there's all these things that people take to survive. What kind of medicines do we have to live, right? And so if you can't name, if you can't say like, yep, I do this thing in the morning. For me, like what my typical day looks like: getting up in the morning, doing some physical activity, listening to something that's going to start my day off. Social media, my email, my phone, it's not part of my morning routine because I recognize the way I start my morning kind of trajects the way that my day is going to look like. So like when I think about my practices for a living, it starts in the morning. When I think about my nighttime routine, phone goes away. Like I'm not in bed scrolling all night. Like I'm listening to things. Like there's different sounds that I listen to at night, and it just brings me so much joy, right? I can't imagine like scrolling, looking at all the bad things that are happening right before bed. It's kind of like, why wouldn't I be able to sleep? Or why of course I'm going to feel anxious. Of course I'm going to struggle with sleeping if I'm not giving my mind a break from all the things that are happening in the world. So really be proactive when it comes to your mental health, when it comes to the way that you are doing things to live life, and give yourself a prescription. Like, you know what? Every day I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to take 5 minutes, have tea, and reflect on my day because that's what I need to live life. And then eventually you'll be able to create like a nice toolbox where you're able to gravitate towards different things on a regular basis. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this makes sense. I always tell people if anything I ever say resonates for you, understand you have power to create change. But in order to do that, you have to have faith to believe in yourself. And when you have faith, like if I have faith in myself, you can't take my faith away from me. I do everything I do, not because like I'm this genius or anything. It's like I have faith and I have my values and my goals and the things that I want to do. So I'm able to keep going regardless of what it looks like, regardless of what somebody says, because I do believe in myself. So I will see you all next Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.